Just start recording that right now. Huh? Yeah. So let's see hope that it picks up her voice. I was like looking through my bag trying to think like, do I have anything that's like some kind of fabric or leather that's like grippy or slide out pretty well. And then inside your purse was like that's perfect. Like the one thing I don't have that I'm not carrying around.
Happy Monday. No? Yeah? Happy Monday. I'm so happy to be here. Okay, so I sent out an announcement on Canvas over the weekend. The plan for today, we're going to go over Pearson and corporate bail. Super duper important, and also I think super interesting. And by important, I mean heavily tested on your exam. It's right there now. So we're going to go over it, but also in life, it's really important to think about the formalities of like legal protection and incorporating. So we're going to go over Pearson and corporate bail, then we're going to start chapter 42. I have designed your assignment for Wednesday. We're going to do a little class. So there's no class meeting on Wednesday. And since there's been a lot of extra credit opportunities, there's another one tomorrow, and then there's another one on the 29th. So instead of making this extra credit, this is going to be your Wednesday assignment. Because I need to do something. I'm not allowed to like have a remote class, which I think they call canceling them. I'm not allowed to do that. They do something to turn in credit based. So we're going to have a remote class, and it'll be a practice, corporations practice test. It's just multiple choice questions and an essay. So that will, we're still in the lead of corporations. That's going to frame your learning for the rest of the section. It's going to give you a little exposure to everything you're going to learn about. And maybe when we learn about it, hopefully it'll be a little familiar when we get there. And we'll see how that impacts the final exam. We can work a little pre-test how it goes. So, good? Okay. And I think there's some of our friends are not here. A lot of our friends are affected by the fire, etc. So if you have a friend in class who's not here, I'll be sending them announcements, but if you could also just take the initiative to send an email, maybe let them know what's going on, just so that everyone stays up to speed and doesn't too far. Okay, questions before we start?
What is the segment?
You know, I'm not going to have it. Oh, someone sent me an email remind me. The homework this due Wednesday, I'll push back. So remind me to push back, and then I don't require it to be turned in on Wednesday. It'll just need to be before we get back from the break, so you can have your, flexibility with your time. I feel like it's been pretty brutal. I usually don't have a virtual class the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I usually have a class meeting, but it's been kind of brutal lately. So it kind of like space to go and be with your family and do your thing, but we still have to do some learning stuff. Maybe like Monday before we start class.
So there's not going to be anything to do by 11 a.m. Wednesday?
No.
Okay.
No, just someone saying no accomplishment.
And tomorrow's speaker is?
Tomorrow's speaker, okay. So this is
so
Sean Ebenheim. This is going to be really cool. This is like I'm Sean Ebenheim. I had a great call with him last week, and he actually has some kids who are like your age. So what I really like is when they come in, they I just relate really well to our crowd, which I really like. But he's a developer. He's really successful. He's not just like a developer, but he also is very involved in the community. He's very involved in like local politics. He started this program at the city where, I don't know if you've ever dealt with getting permits to build anything, or if your parents have, or something, has it. You have to go down to call, you got to get your building permits, and it's a really lengthy process. You sit there like forever. So he developed a fast-track permit process with the mayor's office. He just had this idea. He got the developers to come in and fund it. So it's like a fast-track expediting process. It clears more space for everybody, and it's a pretty innovative program. So he started that. So one thing he's going to talk about is like kind of the power of one. Like you think it's kind of an insurmountable thing, but you can do it. That's going to be a very small part of it. What he's really going to also talk about is remember JJJ, which impacts is put into place about a year ago. It impacts local building. It is related to real estate, but the reason why it's relevant to you is because it goes to the business implications of the measures that we pass. So when we vote on measures like measure JJJ and the things we just voted on recently, a lot of times we look at it from, oh, we got sold by this commercial or whatever it is. Like we're like, I identify with that. I'm going to vote this way. Well, you look at the business implications and the financial implications and maybe what the market can control versus what we might be able to control voting. That's really what he's going to speak to. So it's very much like business consequence politics. And that's really the world we're in. Like we're so over legislated, especially in California, everything's legislated and we vote on all this stuff. So what should we be approving, what should we not be approving, what's the fallout? So Measure JJJ was passed a year ago, so now we're releasing the fallout. He's going to talk about that. And it's like really engaging event. So I encourage you to go, RSVP if you haven't already, just so we can get food. Sign in when you come, you get extra credit. And it's going to be a good session. It's called for 5:45. It was going to start at 6. I just have pizza coming at 5:45. So, and then the 29th, I have another event with two really great guys. I'll tell you about that as it goes. So come to this. I'll be there. It's my event. So sad to have a party and no one comes, right? But these people come and it's very nice. And they do great work and they connect. It gets them involved in our college, and a lot of times my speakers, like, once we get them involved, then we can kind of sell them on scholarships and like that. Like our person coming the 29th, we were able to get him to learn a lot of money for student scholarships. Like this is how we also engage them and get them interested in you and get them coming back and giving jobs and internships. And this is how we kind of keep building our community. All right, here's the corporate bail. So here's the corporate bail. It's a drastic remedy. Because we really recognize that corporations and entities are people too. It's a Citizens United United States Supreme Court case. So corporations are people too. So if this is a corporation, it's its own separate person. And these shareholders are separate people as well. So there's this veil of security, like a security blanket that the corporation has, right? You cannot get through to the shareholders. They have this limited liability status. So if the corporation goes bankrupt, or the corporation incurs some major financial consequence, like a big contract they can't follow through on, or they get sued because someone's injured on the property, and the corporation doesn't have enough assets or insurance to satisfy that judgment or that contractual obligation, whatever the case may be. Does that party who's seeking to recover from the corporation, do they get to recover everything? Say they can only get 80% from the corporation, and so then the party seeking to recover, call it a creditor, is only getting 80% of the 100 that they want, right? So can they go to the shareholders to get that remaining 20%? I was on the phone last week with this attorney who just does debt collection. And so this is like his world. And he tries to find all these different ways to just like collect on debt for his clients. And he's like brutal and brilliant. It was really interesting talking to him. And I had referred my client the case that I had. I told you that I referred to the lawyers. I was talking about like this process. But they'll do everything they can to get through this veil. And if they can penetrate this veil, then they can go up to the shareholder and get the 20% remaining from that shareholder. So that's what I mean by piercing the corporate veil. It's that veil of the entity structure that insulates the shareholders from the debts of the corporation. So it's drastic, it's a drastic remedy, and they only really do it if they can prove that the corporation and the shareholder are alter egos. Alter egos. Was it like the Incredible Hulk who was like a normal human and then like turned into an Incredible Hulk when he got mad? Yes. Right? Alter ego, right? Two in the same, right? That's what they're, that's cool of it. So they get to prove that it's alter ego. So as a general rule, here's how we start the discussion. When there's some sort of, when there's someone who's trying to recover a debt from a shareholder of a corporation, right? As a general rule, the shareholder is not liable for the debts of a corporation. It's a separate legal person with its own separate accounts and its own separate debts and liabilities and assets and all of that, right? So the shareholder is not liable for the debts of a corporation because it's two separate people. Just like your brother. Your brother gets sued. If your brother can't pay the judgment, are you liable? No, it's a separate person. What? Same last name, you're related? You kind of, you see each other at dinner? It's okay, it's fine. It's a separate person, right? So it's that separate, distinct person. Corporations are people, right? So just because there's some sort of relation and some sort of engagement, it doesn't mean that you're going to be liable for each other's debts. Same with a corporation and shareholder. So, as a general rule, you're not liable. However, the shareholders can be deprived of their limited liability protection in certain circumstances. So these certain circumstances are what we're going to discuss now. So here's your general rule. And the book gives us this two-part test, this little paragraph. But I elaborate on it because I think it's more clearly understood in this morning. So on page 1125 or 131 in your reader, it talks about, here's from the corporate veil, 2 requirements have to exist. Here's the corporate veil. The first is domination of the corporation by shareholders and the use of that domination for an improper purpose. So those are kind of really vague terms. It's kind of hard to, I think, analyze just that. So what I've done is I've given you some examples of how to satisfy this element. So that's what this slide here is. These 2 elements, 1 and 2, are the 2 elements that the book calls out for what you need to satisfy to pierce the corporate veil. And what's within are just examples of how that's done. So let's talk about it. The domination of a corporation by shareholders. So an example of this is where a shareholder causes the corporation to act for their personal benefit and not for the benefit of the corporation. So, for example, the shareholder can't pay some for their own personal trip to Barbados. So they're like, oh, a corporation can pay for this. That's a business trip. It's not a business trip, right? They're having a corporation pay for their personal expenses. Or they want to buy a gift for someone, or they want to pay their mortgage, or they want to use it as their personal shopping account, buy a plane. There's all these different examples of like pillaging the corporation, where it's corporate assets, you're using those assets for your own personal purposes, right? It's your own personal benefit.
Isn't that line kind of?
Yeah. Like, isn't that the whole reason why we're entrepreneurs, right? Like, so that we can expense our car lease, and so we can expense a portion of our rent, and so we can expense our cell phone bill. I mean, I do private consulting, and I am going to, like, within the confines of the law, and as far as I can go, I'm going, as far as I can legally go, I'm absolutely going to take advantage of that. But that's the point. It also makes it really difficult. Like, if you're an entrepreneur, good luck getting a mortgage. Because what you do as an entrepreneur, like, maybe you might be living a life as if you're making $500,000 a year. But your tax returns, what they look at, the documents they look at when they look at whether or not they're going to approve you for a mortgage, are going to show much less income because a lot of your expenses are used to reduce those figures. So it's a very, very dynamic situation. So where's the line? Where's the line, right? It's okay. What percentage of your rent can you use for business expenses? Like, I don't know.
Well, what's it again?
Like, so for example, if you work out of your home, you can deduct a certain amount of your mortgage payment or your rent for your business expense. I forget what the limit is. One account, my accountant.
Over there.
Oh, it's by square foot.
By square foot. So by square foot of the house. And that's okay, right? But what if, so you can lawfully, if you work out of your home, like I do, consulting work out of my home, and I know I can deduct 5% of my rent, and my accountant do it for me, because my brain hurts to think about that. But that's okay. But what if I'm trying to run all my rent through my consulting business, right? My corporation. I'm not incorporated. But what if I try to do that, right? That's improper. That's the corporation satisfying my own personal debts and obligations. That's improper. Okay, so what's the Department of Education? Who's the politician who recently came under fire because he ran for president, he's had the secretary. What's his name? Yeah, yes, okay. So didn't he just in trouble because he spent a ton of money on like a dining table and silverware, all this expensive stuff for his office, for the government, like tens and tens of thousands of dollars. Like, so people are angry because he's using government money for his own real kind of personal gain. That's like a perfect example, like something that's completely improper. People up in arms about it. You can read about it. Go look at Ben Carlson's expenditures. And people are upset about it because he's using money that's not his for something that's for his own personal purpose. Like, why do you need a $20,000 dining table or whatever it is, right? Why do you need chairs that are $5,000? Like, they're literally like $5,000 chairs.
To host politicians.
How would
I'm
I
very
define
sensitive.
seats?
So, but that's the kind of thing we're talking about. But that's an abuse, right? That's an abuse, and that's what we're talking about. So, if the government is a corporation and he's using the money for his own personal purpose, like there's no legitimate business purpose for you to have this kind of exorbitant kind of things, especially when you're the housing secretary and there are people who literally are not, housed properly. So, okay, so that's an example. Another example is for those who fail to hold separate shareholder meetings, they don't maintain the corporate formalities. You're supposed to have shareholder meetings and annual meetings, take the minutes of those meetings, write down the minutes. Like in your clubs, I'm sure you have a secretary who takes the minutes of the meetings. You vote on the decisions you make at those meetings. You have a quorum, and you vote, you follow the procedures in your bylaws. That's how the corporation makes choices. Like the corporate brain, it's an entity, right? It's a fiction. Well, the corporate brain makes choices through shareholder votes and through the board of directors. That's the brain. So they have to vote. Are they making votes? Are you segregating accounts? Or do you have just like one account for your entity and for you? If I incorporate, I'm not incorporating now. If I incorporate, I'm going to have to get a separate account. Because right now, I just bank this holding as a sole proprietorship and it all goes to my bank account. I would have to get a separate account if I incorporate and start segregating if I wanted to really have the benefit of connections. Okay, so domination, whatever those facts are, domination makes the corporation the alter ego or the other self of the shareholder. You're saying, oh, that's my other account over there. I'll take the money out of this account. It's my account. It's not the corporation's account. You're using it if it's yours. You're not going through this proper voting procedures or decision-making procedures of the corporation before you access that.
So to prove domination, you need all three or just one?
No, these are just kind of examples. This is kind of like just notes.
So there's other ways to prove domination. Then do you only need one, or do you, or, I guess if you're presenting to the court, I guess the more the better, I guess.
Yes, but one egregious example, would be enough. The reason why I think this is so difficult is because it's fuzzy. It happens in so many different ways. So there's not like battery is, intentional harmful offensive. Like it's not these like, or negligence. These, solid. Like I think we can identify as being violation of the rule. It's kind of fuzzy. You just kind of have to argue for it, and then you think is it more than not. So the next is the use of that domination for an improper purpose. You can't just be dominating, but you have to be using that domination for an improper purpose, like to defraud creditors, or to circumvent statutes, or evade an obligation, like a contractual obligation or money that's owed to someone. Some examples of this are thinly capitalized corporations. If there's a corporation who's taken on really large contracts that's setting themselves up for really big exposure, but they don't have a lot of capital to satisfy their obligations under the contract, it's like, well, corporation, did you really think that you could satisfy your obligation under the contract? You don't have the financial wherewithal to do that. That's what we call it. It's thinly capitalized or undercapitalized if it can't cover its foreseeable liabilities.
Domination again, it's taking advantage of your own personal gain? Personal usage?
Yes, it's acting as if, I think of dominating in like the classic sense, right? Like you're taking it over. You're acting as if it's yours. It's like you're not treating it like it's its own separate legal entity. It's not giving the respect of its own separate legal person. You're acting as if it's yours, and you're just kind of closing it. You're not utilizing. You're not acting as if it has its own decision maker, right? Even though you might be even the sole shareholder, the corporation is still its own separate entity, and you're the decision maker for it. But it's in the context of as a shareholder for the entity. So it's I think it gets easier as we go through more examples. So here's an example. So X is a shareholder and CEO of BLAW Co. Inc. BLAW Co. Inc. is a corporation that hauls and disposes of nuclear waste. Real hazardous. BLAW Co. does not carry insurance. BLAW Co. has an initial capitalization of $1,000. X commingles personal and corporate funds. B is injured, the victim is injured when one of BLAW Co.'s trucks melts down and these two tanks. So this is like the most extreme example, but it just gives us some fodder to put into our rule. So read it again and we'll go back to the rule. X is a shareholder and CEO of BLAW Co., a corp that hauls and disposes of nuclear waste. BLAW Co. doesn't have insurance, has capitalization of $1,000. It commingles corporate and personal funds, and victims injured when the truck melts down. Freeway and D2X. Okay. Well, so first, as a general rule, can D2X as a general rule, a shareholder is not liable for the debts of the corporation. However, a shareholder can be deprived of their limited liability in certain circumstances. This would be when there's a corporate bail, like in the middle of the year.
so nomination for improper use.
Right, so let's just pretend also. So commingling personal corporate funds. So Chris, I'm gonna go get some coffee. I'm just gonna take some money out of your account and go get it. Is that cool? Right, right. So but you're the corporation and I'm the shareholder. But I can't just do that? No, it's separate, right? So if you actually treated that corporation like it's a person and you're like, hey, I'm just gonna go buy a new car and use your money, is that cool? Like think of the shareholder, the corporation like a person and you're like, oh yeah, that's all right. It's hard to envision it because you might be the sole shareholder and your corporation, you're 100% shareholder, so that's separate legal entity that is the corporation. Okay.
So even though the injury has nothing to do with the commingling of the funds, that's still like what they would use?
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Wait, say that one more time?
Also, like, not having shareholders meetings, like what does that have to do with an injury, right? It's not really related, but it's still like how they would kind of get past
Kind of pierce.
all that.
A reason to pierce?
Because it didn't really cause the injury,
Right.
so I just don't.
Right. That's a really good point. It didn't cause injury. It does have an impact on the corporation's ability to pay that debt or satisfy that judgment as it becomes due. But you're right. The fact that it's really capitalizing the fact that he's using corporate assets to set up, for his own personal gain or whatever, isn't directly what caused the BLAW truck to tip over and melt down, right? So that's a really good point, and that's correct. So you don't have to prove this like causal nexus between the bad act and the piercing of the veil.
Does that also mean that in a case where the corporation has no problem paying whatever it would have to pay, there's no reason to pierce the veil even if they could?
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason to. It's a really difficult. It's like, so it's, if there's a judgment, like a lawsuit judgment or like a creditor obligation that's just obviously like due and owing, it's not very difficult to levy that, to get the money for that, right? There's various ways to do that. The only time you would take the trouble to go through this, which is that you have to go to court and seek this remedy, is if you could not execute the judgment. Like if all of a sudden a defendant tries to judge it for himself by selling off all his assets in the middle of litigation. That happens all the time. Like you sue someone and then all of a sudden like they're asset free through the course of litigation. You're like, oh my gosh, well, what am I going to do to satisfy my judgment against you? Well, that's when you would do this and you try to invalidate whatever transfers he did, get through whatever entity structures he has protecting himself, and get through the assets, process the bill, those other entities.
So what if he didn't commingle funds and this is just thin capitalization because he didn't have insurance? Could you still pierce the veil?
If he didn't commingle funds, it was just thinly capitalized.
Because let's say, nuclear waste that costs like $1 million, it ruins a town.
Yeah.
Are they really just going to let him go away?
Right. No. I mean, here, what could your argument be? Could you say, is there a domination of the corporation by shareholders? I mean, you have a shareholder who's making bad choices for the corporation,
Yeah.
right? Who's put the corporation in a position where it's not able to even come close to satisfying foreseeable obligations. But that makes it a little more difficult. That's not, now you take out the perfect fact of him commingling accounts and stuff. I would want to ideally look for something else to show domination, but because of how bad the facts are here, I think that you could probably argue domination based on just the bad choices that we make. Yes.
So the court looks that if the corporation were to have a board meeting on shareholders, they would be able to maybe figure out a way to avoid the situation like this?
So what the court looks at is, for example, if you're in a business like this where you're handling hazardous materials, there's a lot of laws and regulations and environmental laws, political laws, and other things that impose massive liability on people that handle any sort of like hazardous waste. And it's a they're actually strict liability statute. So this is very, very extreme. So if an entity gets into this very extreme high exposure business without insurance and with like no capitalization, it's an egregious, almost like, I'm based on, I didn't teach you the environmental law Going into a business where you can incur these kinds of huge massive liabilities and not having adequate capitalization, not having the ability to foresee to meet this person's needs is like the perfect formula for it. So, should I remind you of I thought it was a perfect X. Our judge didn't go for it, but the back pattern that we had for piercing the corporate veil. This is where you see it most often in practice because it's usually for a smaller business. The larger businesses are going to be made more formalities. They're going to be a little more structured. They're going to have all their VPs and maybe more public board and that kind of thing. So it's usually the happens of a smaller business where it's just a messy bookkeeping, messy. Just people aren't really understanding that they need to have this separation. It's very, very easy to treat something like it's your own entity. Take loans to and from the business, kind of messy. So in our situation, we had a company. It was a pretty large company, but it was just owned by one person, and there was an employment lawsuit. And so there was a wrongful termination case. Someone was injured, and instead of accommodating this person, they were fired. And so the employee sued for wrongful termination. The employer is a corporation, and there's only one shareholder. This one shareholder also was the managing member of an LLC. The LLC owned the office where the corporation did business. The only thing the LLC did was own this office, and the corporation paid below market rent to the LLC. So, one shareholder, managing member, sole owner of LLC, well, I'm with his wife, they divorced, I just need and the sole shareholder of this corporation entity. So this guy is going and doing all sorts of fraudulent stuff. He was arrested. He's in federal prison for attempted trafficking of counterfeit goods. So he doesn't show up to his deposition. No one tells us why. He doesn't show up to court. No one tells us why until the judge demands to know. And his employer's like, oh, he's in federal prison in Oregon. So we hire a PI. No one's using information on him. So he's in federal prison for this fraudulent conduct, right? Attempted trafficking counterfeit goods, like that's fraudulent, right? So we're thinking, okay, he's totally smeared, it's good. The judge wouldn't let that information in front of the jury, so we couldn't get it in front of the jury. This guy, the shareholder, puts on his manager, who testifies that what he's actually doing in China is missionary work. It's very religious, doing missionary work. Oh, it's so great, that's gonna lie for you, and no, we can't say he's in federal prison. Thanks, Judge. So he says he's doing all this missionary work. While the litigation is ongoing, all of a sudden, this corporation is starting to liquidate assets. They're liquidating assets. So now the corporation has nothing, and we got a judgment. We did win, and so we secured a judgment, a jury verdict, and now the corporation is saying, well, we can't pay it. I'm like, how can you have like 20 employees, all of these computers with a tech company, and not be able to pay a six-figure judgment, not even high six-figure? Like, you should have this money. You're saying we can't pay it. Okay, fine, you can't pay it. So if you can't pay it, then we want to be able to file a lien on this property. The office, where this guy works, the property, right? The property's owned basically by you. So if we can pierce the veil and get to you, and pierce this veil, and get back down here, then we can get to the property and file a lien on the property. So that's really what we were trying to do, is file a lien on the property. You don't win all of them. I'm so pissed about this. You don't win all of them, but I thought if you're going to win, I thought this was a really good fact pattern to win.
They said no why?
The judge said no.
But why?
He said no, I think primarily because even though he was divorced, they hadn't cleaned up the paperwork, but based on the paper trail, it looked like his ex-wife was also an owner of the LLC, and there would be some sort of injury to her if we proceeded to this.
I mean, I feel like they shouldn't care about that.
I know.
No problem.
Wait, so how can what protect you?
I know. I know. You know, the thing that sucks about it is judges are human, right? And I'm human, we're all human, and try to get some of this your point of view. But he thought that we couldn't find as much evidence that they're failing to maintain their corporate formalities. Some of the evidence that they looked at was sharing an office space, sharing staff, sharing all these different things. But the LLC filed its own LLC filed its own tax returns, and the corporation filed its own tax returns. LLC had its own bank account, corporation had its own bank account. There were no transfers to and from these specific bank accounts. And so the judge had a hard time finding enough nexus between these two entities to allow us to go up and back down. I think he would have let us go up here, but this guy was judging who had no money, he's in federal prison. So we didn't want to just go up here. We were going with really extreme. We were like double piercing with not really a lot of bad evidence on this company. So we could have gone up to here, but we wanted to get down to here and then down to the property. And it would have been extreme, and the judge would have opened himself up to appeal. But here's the crap part. This stuff pisses me off. This guy, guess who's paying this company's legal fees? A shared lawyer, right? A shared lawyer. But this lawyer, guess what he did in order to secure payment for his fees? He put a lien on this property. And I'm like, wait, you're defending this company, but to secure your right to payment, you put a lien on this property. Because we hired a private investigator, and we found that this lawyer had a lien on this property. I'm like, why would this company pay your fees with a lien on this property if it wasn't the same thing? Anyway. I don't like to lose. All right. What are you going to do? All right, that's enough. You want us to be a lawyer now? One day I'll play for you the Don't Be a Lawyer song. Those of you who want to go to law school, stay after class, I'll play you a song. Okay, so are we good?
Also, the final question on
Yeah.
Can the be sued next then? I think yes.
Oh, yes. So in this fact pattern, it's so extreme. It's the facts that are kind of to the extreme that give you something to put in those. Yes. Defend the capitalization, no insurance, using the accounts, not making total formalities. I mean, here they had separate bank accounts, same accountant, but separate tax returns, all that. Okay, chapter 42. All right. So, we did a case on this. You turned in homework. So before I get to this, I just want to just check in with your homework just a little bit. So, the Tedeton versus Tedeton miracle soap case. I don't know if any of you felt intrigued by the case, but I just want to share with you what this case is about, right? Miracle tea soap. So let me tell you a little something about this soap. This is like hippie goodness stuff, right? So you heard Dr. Bronner. This is like above and beyond the hippie level of Dr. Bronner. This guy had some like divine revelation where the formula of this soap was revealed to him. So he created this soap and then he sold it through his ministry. And obviously, because he's a man of the cloth, not a lawyer, he may or may not have maintained corporate formalities when he formed this entity, right? But this is what happens. You get an idea, you make your soap, you sell your soap, and you just form your entity, and it's fabulous, right? Well, and then someone dies, and Thanksgiving gets awkward, and the family starts fighting about who owns the company. But this is the soap. So there's
What is it?
Oh, it does everything. It does everything. Look, it's a soap, a cleaner, degreaser, deodorant.
Oh, I didn't read.
I read it. I was listening to a YouTube.
Clean.
I did research for you, just so you know.
Okay.
I watched a lot of YouTube videos and also be used in purpose.
Whoa.
All right. So this is our guy. So this is Clayton. Divine inspiration, legislation, directly to the formula for the miracle tea soap, and thousands of satisfied users have discovered a multitude of uses. It works wonders. So here's the story. It was God who gave me the formula for the amazing miracle soap. I woke one night in July to see names of minerals all miraculously flashed on my bedroom wall. The formula and how to mix
They
it.
have that on the website.
Yeah, something else. I had been talking to God. I had been talking to God. And he was talking to me. My wife would hear me talking and would ask me what in the world is going on. And I would tell her, I don't know. And I would explain to her what's happening in my life. I talked to God and he said, I'm going to give you something that every person that I have created on this earth will need. And as long as you give me the word, you will prosper. So at 1 a.m., the formula flashed on his bedroom wall, and he created it. And he was told it's time to do the work. So he did it.
It's not even showing.
So
on the
then he
video.
talked to the Lord, and he said, I've got to have instructions for this product to be used. A day later, the Lord instructed me to take some of this product for a woman of color, use it for everything. I don't know the lady this time. After 3 days, she called and said, every time I use a product, the strangest thing happens to me. I'm going to have to pray about this. And on and on and on and on and on.
The slide
There you go.
show.
You can receive what you've always desired, contentment and peace in your soul. From miracles. Okay, and I joke, my mother is the most religious person in the world, so just know that is like, she was in a convent before she went with my dad in church and the band and all that stuff. I joke, but like, it's from good books.
Does he ever give a reason for why he called it Miracle 2? Is that supposed to be some kind of religious
Divine
thing?
revelation is a miracle. Why the number 2 though, right? What happened to number 1? Is
It
that
failed. Number one, you weren't able to sell them.
number 1 and so?
No, you got mine and
Okay. So, I love, but and the reason why I bring this up, not only because it's interesting, but also because put yourself in the headspace of this entrepreneur. Put yourself in the headspace. Is he thinking, I'm going to go file my articles of incorporation, I'm going to authorize X number of shares, I'm going to give share certificates to me and my son because he's going to contribute the labor, and I've got this idea, and this is what we're going to do. I'm going to put my corporate minute book together, we're going to write our bylaws, and fabulous, here's my binder of stuff. No, he's thinking like flashing minerals on the wall, so call the lady, how do you like it? Like, that's what he's thinking, and when you come up with an idea, that's what you're thinking too. And then someone's going to like put the brakes on and say, hold up, like, let's go about this the right way, hopefully. So this gives you an idea of the dispute and where these people are coming from. There's more. You want to learn more? There's more.
Click here to learn more.
There's an interview. This is a 5-part interview.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And now, health is your wealth. Sponsored by the Sheila Lynn Baker Health Foundation.
Okay.
Here's your hope.
These people worship.
With my hair, with my skin, with a lot of things.
Yeah, you look about, I'd say a good 15 years younger, and even you can about 3 months, right?
Yeah, it's been about 3 months. So we're really fortunate to have this.
15 years younger after 3 months. So this stuff is a miracle. It's a miracle. And then so this lady, the non-toxic soap cleaner, she's not even paid for this promo spot, she says. She loves it so much. And then, I'm just warning you, if you look for Miracle 2 soap, what's going to come up on your suggested YouTube videos on the right, Bob Ross.
No,
It came up. Just letting you know. I don't know if you know this guy.
Bob Ross is the king.
So, I don't know if you know this guy. I haven't said it. So, Miracle Soap, that's the headspace we're in. That's the space we're in. This is the space where our parties who are now fighting, this is where they're at. So we did your homework and we have our fact pattern, but isn't it more illuminated when you really know like what's going on and who we're dealing with and like really where this dispute happens? I think it really helps because it really underscores that we're not focusing on this. Like these geniuses who create these amazing products and these ideas, they're not the business people. They're not the team. That's why we need a team. That's why we need the accountants and the financial planners and all the balance of it, so that we can make sure not only do we have the idea, but we can make it profitable and in a lawful way. So we're going to get to the case in a second after we talk about a little bit of the transfer. So we talk about this morning. All right, promoters. So promoters, it's like Clayton. Right, Clayton is the idea. Promoters are people acting on behalf of a corporation not yet formed. So they don't always know they're being a promoter. They're just going out and they're filling out the marketplace, right? It's that person who thinks that they want to have a clothing store. And so they go out and start looking at commercial leases and different spaces. And maybe they find a place that's perfect for them. And they think, oh, I need to tie up this place, get into a lease, get into a contract before it goes out to market. So I'm going to enter into a lease right now. I haven't formed a corporation yet, but this is where I'm going to have my store. I see it, right? So they're going out, they're entering into contracts. Maybe they're trying to source materials. Maybe they're trying to find a place in Los Angeles to sew the clothing that they're going to be designing whatever it is, right? So they're entering into all these contracts, and you don't just start a business, right? You just start a business, you don't just like incorporate a business and start going. When you incorporate, you have to pay the corporation fees. You also have to pay your California franchise tax board fees right off the bat, and that can be like $600. It's still $800. Like it's a legitimate consideration. So keep on doing your research. Go get the streets. And then you get these ideas, you come across opportunities, and we get this I don't know, we get this impulse. I gotta look it up. I gotta look up this news. I gotta, this is a great deal. Or how to secure this contract. So you end up doing stuff before you're incorporated, and that's just what happens. So what's the issue becomes, who's liable? Is it the promoter? And they don't know they're a promoter. They're just someone who's going to go start a business, right? So if it's someone who's going to go start a business, who's a promoter, or is it a corporation, or is it both? Who's liable on these contracts? So here's the general rule. The corporation becomes liable on a promoter's written corporation contract when the corporation adopts the contract by either an express board or director resolution, and a resolution has to be in written format, right? So the board of the corporation, shareholders, whoever's making this choice, have to vote, and that vote is how the board makes its choice, has to be used in writing. So it's a formal adoption, or implied adoption through knowledge of the contract and acceptance of its benefits. So if the corporation then moves into this retail space and starts operating business, then yes, it can be liable on the contract. That doesn't mean that the promoter is released from liability. It just means the corporation now is also liable on the contract. So adoption of a contract similar to ratification of agency principles, who here is the agent?
Is there a declaration that the form that you fill out for the state, the Secretary of State?
Oh, that's articles of incorporation. So, yes, resolution, it's like a motion, like I'm not sure how your class works. When you go to faculty meetings, like it's all self-governance and the university system, everything voted, you have to move to pass this resolution or that resolution, right? So at the board of directors meetings, and maybe you're about like like I move to adopt this lease, and formally adopt this lease, then you like who's in favor of these things? Right? So then if a majority of the quorum present vote in favor, then there would be an official resolution, and that resolution would be entered into the minutes of the meeting. Let me pull some of those for you. I can post some so you can look at it, but you'll have the meeting minutes of board meetings. Right, and then they'll have right here they'll have resolutions. And then it'll literally have the text of the matter of whether or not the corporation should adopt XYZ contract came up for discussion. After thorough discussion, X board member moved to approve, XYZ moved in favor to pass the resolution. So it literally was all the resolutions. So that's decisions. Okay, so the promoter, that answers the question whether it's a corporation liable, right? Is the corporation formally adopted or accept the benefits, so impliedly adopted? So you can expressly or impliedly adopt the contract. So that answers the question whether the corporation becomes liable, but then we still have this ongoing issue whether the promoter is still liable. I mean, isn't the whole purpose of forming a corporation so that the shareholders don't have personal liability? So that promoter is like that first shareholder. And so how do they get out from this personal liability? Well, they have to seek what's called emulation. When this came up in that agency concept, it comes up a lot in the really law class, so emulation. So the promoter and any co-promoters are jointly and severally liable on creating corporation contracts until there's that emulation. So the party with whom the promoter dealt. So here we have promoter and a landlord, and they enter into a lease. Well, after the corpus formed, and moves into the space, even if there's no formal resolution, they're now accepting the benefit of this contract, right? So they've impliedly adopted it. So now the promoter and the corporation are liable. So for some reason, the corp's not paying, the LLC, the landlord can go to the promoter, and vice versa, right? So how then can the promoter be relieved of liability? They have to seek what's called a negation, which is where the corporation and the landlord together agree to release the promoter from liability. The corporation and the landlord together agree to release the promoter of liability. So it's an agreement between the promoter, the corporation, and the other contracting party that the corp will replace the promoter, and the promoter will no longer be liable.
Why would the landlord do it though? It seems like they're not inclined.
Exactly. Why would the landlord do it? It's a really good question. Sometimes, after the fact, there's really no incentive for the landlord to do that, right, after the fact. So the recommendation would be that when the promoter is going and approaching the landlord for the lease, the promoter would say, my intention is to form a corporation, and when the corporation is formed, I want an automatic negation. And so you put an automatic negation term into the contract, so when the entity is formed, there's an automatic negation. It's brought up to the landlord at the time. And the landlord may or may not agree, and you have to decide whether or not you want to proceed. I was negotiating a lease for a client who really wanted the space, and the landlord was kind of had a really burdensome terms, and they weren't willing to move off them. And I'm like, look, you're not going to move off XYZ. We got these loans for you, like you made the financial, and there's some other other issues out there that you're just not going to move on. And do you want the space? Because you can walk. You know, it's a unique mechanism for the space. You want to walk. You don't want to walk. So then it's like, okay, what are we going to deal with? So you can't always get everything you want, but then these contracts are also consensual. You know, enforce it. So, but the recommendation would be for the promoter to try to get the lease on that automatic negation when the corporation is formally incorporated. So this guy,
Okay, what is promoter liability? Well, early in the formation of a corporation, the corporation is going to adopt the activity by the promoter or the incorporator of the business. All the actions that took place before the corporation was actually in existence. And by accepting those or ratifying those, it removes or takes liability off of the promoter and brings it into the corporation, okay, as if the corporation prior to existence had actually done those actions. Now, in some cases, this may not happen. The actions of the promoter may exceed what was anticipated by the corporation. All the actions may not be ratified, or the corporation may forget or not ratify certain actions by the promoter, in which case the promoter could potentially be liable for actions taken in the process of bringing about or forming the corporation. This may happen particularly when the promoter's out seeking endorsement or trying to get commitments from future shareholders that they will in some way purchase equity and capitalize the corporation to be formed. If the promoter makes promises or undertakes activity in this regard that is not lived up to, and those actions are not noted and adopted by the board at the time, then the shareholder might have an action back against the promoter for that type of activity. So generally that's what promoter liability is. It's those actions that are not ratified by the corporation, but they were taken by this individual in bringing about the corporate entity.
Okay, so this guy is embedded in the PowerPoint on your video, but he actually has this whole textbook, business on textbook that's online. You can start all these videos, and he's got these little sound bites for every little topic. So if it's something you want to look at, I have Professor Williams posted, all of her PowerPoints posted. He also has these little sound bites from the things that he will access to. Okay, so he brought up an interesting point, and it's the future shareholders, and we're going to get to that. Like the future shareholders, the future investors, the subscription agreements. So let's keep that in mind while we move forward. So, okay, promoters. We talked about their possible contract liability. What about their tort liability? So this is an actual malicious tort, but we're talking about tort law here. So promoters are jointly and severally liable on torts committed by co-promoters before incorporation. Wow, what's it sound like? If there's no incorporation and there's co-promoters and there's joint and several liability, is there a business entity we have at this time? Partnership, right? So until the corporation is formed, if there's more than one promoter acting together, they've got partnership level liability That's important to know, because at any given moment in time, like I always say, like, what are the rights and duties of the parties? Like, what's the relationship right now? So before it's incorporated, if there's more than one promoter, but there's just one promoter and it's not incorporated yet, what is that guy called? That lady? Sole proprietor, right? You never incorporated, that person's acting on their own. And if it's two incorporators, those two are called. So that defines the rights and duties for things that happen up until that point, and then when it's incorporated, it will modify. Okay, so who's liable if the promoter enters into a contract and the corporation is never formed? The promoter. The promoter's liable. Okay, so who's liable if the promoter enters into a pre-incorporation contract and the corporation forms and merely adopts the contract?
Still the promoter.
Both.
Promoter and the corporation. Corporation adopted it, did not give innovation, just adopted it, right? So they adopted it, so the corporation's liable too, but the promoter remains liable because there's no innovation. And there's no facts about any automatic innovation provisions in the contract. Cases? Yes? No? I try to do this for questions. No questions? Good? Okay. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit more. Promoters are fiduciaries. You've learned a lot about fiduciary duty. Promoters are fiduciaries. They're fiduciaries of each other if there's more than one promoter. They're fiduciaries, and that's obvious, right? Because partners are fiduciaries of each other. They're fiduciaries of the corporation and the prospective investors. So those future shareholders. The promoters are fiduciaries of future shareholders. We don't know who they are yet, but we're still fiduciaries of those future shareholders. And so because of that, they owe duty of honesty, good faith, fair dealing, all that good stuff, full disclosure. Accordingly, they cannot make secret profits. They can't make secret profits. You can make profit, it's not secret profit, right? So, in order to make a profit and have it be okay, same as the other rule, we learned previously, act in good faith, disclose, and make information. I'll give you an example of that in a second. So, you can't make a profit, a secret profit, but you can make a profit if you act in good faith, disclose, and make information. Because it's possible that as a promoter for this corporation, I'm forming a corporation to sell miracle soap. I have this intellectual property. It's very, very valuable. I created it myself, so it was no cost to me. And now that I patented it, it's worth $100,000. So I'm going to sell it to the corporation for $100,000. I'm making a profit. As long as I act in good faith, disclose, and pay commission, it's fine. Or maybe so you have some other asset. Or maybe you were in one type of business and that business goes down, but you have some of the manufacturing materials or supplies or equipment or whatever. You're going to start a new business and sell that stuff to the new entity. That's okay. You can sell it at fair market value, whatever. As long as you act in good faith, disclose, and pay commission, you can't enter into a contract with a new entity. And frequently when someone starts a business, it's because they already have something of value to contribute. So you can make a profit, it's not a secret one. And if for some reason the profit was secret, then what you do is you disgorge the ill-gotten gains, you just take back the promoter's profit. So the damage to the corporation's profit. So on January 10th, Paula begins working as a promoter for the vegan corned beef jelly beef. On March 10th, Paula buys a ton of vegan corned beef for $10,000. On April 3rd, Paula sells a vegan corned beef to the corporation for $20,000. May the corporation sue Paula? No big show. So, January 10th, she started working as a promoter. On March 10th, she bought the stuff for $10,000. And on April 3rd, after the corporation was later incorporated, she sold it to the corporation for $20,000. Made the corporation too small. So you guys can go to some IRA. What's the issue? Yeah, is she liable for the $10,000? Like, does she have to pay that to the corporation? Like $10,000 of profit to the corporation? We don't have all the facts. But we do know that this is a rule, right? Promoters are fiduciaries of the corporation, and because they're fiduciaries, they have to act in good faith, and make all the bill disclosures, and give duty of honesty, etc. They can't make a secret profit, and so in order to do so, I think they disclose the commission. Here, we don't have any facts about whether she acted in good faith, disclosure, or commission. But if she did, it would be fine. So long as she acts in good faith, discloses to the corporation and all the interested parties that she bought it for $10,000 and is now selling it for $20 and gets commission, it's okay. If she doesn't, she has to give back the 10 grand. So it'd be her profit. Not the 20 grand the corporation paid, but the 10 grand of profit. So her ill-gotten gains. So now we're going to get into shares a little bit, and that we'll have all of our vocabulary to discuss our case, because we're going to talk about promoters and shares and all of that. So we've got this Investopedia video, and then we're going to get into our case. So if you don't have your videos up, bring them up.
A stock is a share of the ownership of a company. As the owner of the stock, the stockholder, you have a claim on the company's assets and earnings. Suppose Steve is starting a company, Highs R Us. He needs $100,000, but doesn't want to borrow from a bank. Instead, Steve invests $10,000 of his own money and finds 9 other investors who are willing to invest $10,000 each. In return, he gives each investor a certificate that represents 10% of his company. Each certificate represents 10% of the company's assets, the building, the pie pans, and the baking materials, and 10% of any future earnings. After 1 year, the company is doing well, and the company's total value increases to $200,000. This means each share of the company is now worth $20,000. $200,000 divided by 10 shares. That's twice the original $10,000. The original investors can sell their stock in the company to other investors for a 100% profit. This is how stocks work. Stocks are bought and sold daily on the major exchanges.
All right. So I know this is very soft work, but okay. So let's go to our code thing. I know you all have it. So Shannon, can you run us what happened in this? Jason, what happened?
Yeah, so basically what happened is that the son, the father, Clayton, and the son, they joined into a corporation to break the soap, and basically they didn't start selling it at first, and then eventually started selling it, and then when Clayton passed away, the son, Clayton, wanted 100% of the company, but the wife and daughter was like, no, we have 50%.
Okay, good. So there's a dispute over who owns the company now that Clayton passed away. And for another little document, there's no just, certificates or anything that show. People don't really issue certificates anymore. When I was doing compliance work, when I was in law school, it was a corporate legal, and we did all this compliance work. So I was at CG Corp, and our clients were these big law firms. So we, for example, did the compliance work for the Louisiana merger for ourselves in 2001. So they merged, and we had to file articles of merger, and we merged all the non-existence all in the United States, and we filed articles of incorporation, we all compliance work. So when we used to do that in 2001, 2002, we would have share certificates and these binders that people would get. Like we'd have their binder, we could buy a binder from like the articles of incorporation, we have them, we tell them off the shares they have, we put that on the incorporation, we have share certificates, we have this like tabs in the binders. Now it's all electronic, so it's easier to make a mistake. It's easier to overlook it because you don't have like this kind of binder you're going to keep you organized, right? So it's not surprising that it was as messy as it was, and it's just getting worse now because we don't have the structure that we used to remind us to do it. So what's our issue? Shannon, you got the issue? Jason, specifically.
Basically the issue is, does daughter and wife have entitled to 50 shares up to 8 even though they had no part of it, and that's what.
Okay, so, our, Brittany's daughter and wife and those, part of the company, so we're trying to figure out who the shareholders are, any other issue statements? Chris?
Where I wrote, Clay Henderson solely own all shares of Petco Inc. or share 50% ownership of its son, Kirk Henderson. And are Clayton's heirs, the claimant is entitled to all shares of the 50%.
Okay, okay, so now who are shareholders, who owns entity? Jamie Steele. What did you say?
Is Kirk tenant entitled to all the shares of the corporation after 2020 tenants passing under the contents of Articles of Incorporation and Louisiana Corporation Law?
Well, good, so now we have who's a shareholder under the law, okay? Emma, what's your issue statement?
Did the charter code make the right decision by assigning 50/50 ownership of Petco shares to Clayton and Clark to the under section 52 rules and all claimants, Pepsi and BLAW in order to the social corporation?
Okay, so was the trial court correct in assigning 50/50 ownership to Clayton and his son under what?
Under section 52.
Okay, 1252. Okay, and what else did you went on to say?
And Article 5 can see his daughter entitled to the portion of Clayton as well.
Okay, so basically 4 different versions of like who's a shareholder, right? I like to look at issue statements just so we can kind of see if there are numerous ways to communicate a similar principle. Sarah, what do you for issue statement?
The trial court error in the verdict of Kirk and Clayton being 50/50 owned.
Very good. So what is the rule that we're talking about here? What are you saying?
Basically, there's the Literally under the section 52 of the issuance of shares in consideration, basically when entering into corporation, it's how the shares are divided up initially.
Right, so we have this, this basically the first paragraph, right? Issuance of shares, it requires consideration, right? So you have to, there has to be some sort of consideration. And we know what consideration means because of contract law. Because in contract law, what would we call consideration means? What's consideration?
Something of value.
Anything of value, right? Anything of legal value. And so the case law says that a mere peppercorn is enough. So like, and a peppercorn is like, literally that's the case to say. The peppercorn is what you buy in like those, you know, like fresh pepper grinders. Like so you get it from Costco, you know, like a lot of consideration. So a mere peppercorn and stuff. So you have one peppercorn, like what's that worth? Like a fraction of a penny. But if I sell you my house for a peppercorn, as long as there's something of legal value going each way, the court's not going to step in and say, oh, that's not valid because it's insufficient consideration. That's not the question. The question is there something of value? Not is the value commensurate or the value appropriate? We're not going to save grown-ups like their contracts, right? Because the grown-ups are contract. They have capacity, they're not drop, right? All this stuff. So we're not going to save these capable grown-ups from their bad contracts. So don't look at how much value there is or is a reasonable value. Just look at something of value. So there's something of value. So in order to issue shares, there has to be some sort of consideration. And we're very, very easy on what that might be, right?
Did you ever call?
I'm just noticing. So, okay. So what counts as consideration? We have a few different elements here, and you can condense it for us. And I think we have this rule section.
Well, I actually had a different rule of promoters.
Okay. Okay, so you want me to start with promoters. Very good. What do you have?
Basically, the whole promoters
slide where they're acting as persons on behalf of the corporation, not yet formed. That was during the time when you had the divine revelation. And then the corporation becomes liable on the promoter's pre-incorporation contract. I'm just reading word for word.
Okay.
Basically, either express for it or implied for it, adoption through knowledge of the contract and acceptance of its benefits.
Okay. And what's the contract we're talking about? So,
The one initially formed between the father and son.
okay, so their initial contract is.
They're gonna start a sole business.
Right, and what's the consideration of both parties? The dad's consideration is.
50-50.
So that'll be the split that they're alleging, right? But what is the actual consideration? Like, what are they infusing into the corporation? What are they giving to the corporation?
Their fiduciary duty.
They owe fiduciary duty, but what are they giving in exchange for their shares? What value are they giving in exchange for their shares? What dad is intellectual, right? Well, I mean, it's actually divine inspiration, but he would call it.
The dad is giving like all rights to the formula and everything for the soap, and the son is giving his like property to be used as a workspace and his time to put into running the business.
Yes, right. So the dad's giving the intellectual property, and the son gave the time and the space. Did they even know that that was happening? I feel like the son giving the time and space was more like after the fact. This was really, really imperfect. It didn't just so happen that he separated from his wife kicks him out, and he's got somewhere to go, so he goes to his son's house and starts living there and starts working out there. If this is even less perfect than an agreement up front, it's more like after the fact consideration. Is that enough? Yes.
But what is the part where the son, this consideration to me look at like the management of the early part of the business, that his time and that portion of the also consideration?
Yes, absolutely. So, so the consideration is fixed by the incorporators. It may be paid by corporeal or incorporeal property. And what's that mean?
Either real or intangible.
Perfect. So real or intangible, that's really what we use nowadays. And intangible is the emotion. Right. So it could be real or corporeal, and the director's valuation placed on the consideration other than cash is conclusive. So if they decide this intellectual property is worth $50, that's conclusive. The court's not going to come in and question that. Okay. So let's get into some. So Tyler D, can you use the application?
Kurt's gonna argue, he brought an action for declaratory judgment against his mother and his sisters, arguing he was the only shareholder of Techco at the time of Clayton's death. He wants 100% of the control of the company, and there was a lot relying on these default rules. Techco never declared who the initial shareholders were and never stated what would happen to the shares of a deceased member. And then I put for like distributions. I mean, I didn't know how it was gonna work, but either the wife gets it by default, or in the case where the wife and the sister get the 50%, the son would also share part of that split, so he would get even more shares, because if like the whole family, like just because he already owns 50%, so I talked a little bit about that.
Okay.
I just put the most likely outcome would be that the wife would inherit it solely, the other 50%. for the next wife?
Right, okay, so let's go back up, so yes, I mean, not all that's really relevant. Let's go back up to their dispute. So the trial court held that Kirk and Clayton were 50-50 owners, and that's after the fact. Kirk appealed, because he wants the whole tamale, right, he wants to be the whole owner. And his mother and sisters argued that Kirk did not have been a typical shareholder because he didn't get proper consideration. So he's saying, I get everything, I'm not happy with 50-50, and they're saying he gets nothing. So, does the court get to the question of if he just gets 50% and the dad has 50% and he dies, who's the dad 50% go to? I never named an issue, but yes, so to address that, you would follow that state's rules of intestate succession if you didn't have a will. So what do you do? What the kid, and what the will says or what the law says, but that's a really interesting point. In any event, the company never said any of this. Remember the articles of incorporation that we looked at for California? Does it say who the shareholders are? The articles of incorporation? No. It says you have to write down how many shares are authorized, and you have to have it signed by the incorporator. And that's it. So it's very likely that they found the articles of incorporation and never did any other paperwork. So they have this many authorized shares. They never said who those shareholders were, and they just started like making soap, selling soap, having visions, right? So it's very messy. It's after the fact. So what is like the moral? I'm going to get one other person to read their analysis. Tyler, you're going to read their analysis.
I put like in this case, defendant Kirk brought an action to the judgment against his mother and his sister okay. The company was formed without articles of incorporation and corporate documents to identify the actual shareholders. Kirk's position in the company proved that of an owner from the initial consideration of shares. There's nobody else that is except for mom and the wife.
Don't self-censor because I'm sure it's good. Okay, got it. Okay, so when we do our analysis, we want to make sure we're analyzing all these elements. So we'll talk about how the court says the shares can be fixed by the incorporators. Here, the corporation and the incorporators did a really messy job because they didn't so articulate. So we have to go back and do after the fact analysis. Can people leave a rule or intangible property? Yes, it can. So what was the consideration made? The court weighed the consideration, determined that intellectual property for services and that they're using the space as physical space to manufacture it is good, and the director's value on the property except cash is conclusive. So although the mom and the sisters were trying to dispute the value of the son's contribution, well, it's not the value, it's just the fact that it's there is what we're going to be analyzing. So what did the court determine? There's no real like end of the story. What's the conclusion there?
It's just for the siblings. Go ahead.
Right, the trial court affirmed that it was reasonable for the appellate court affirmed the trial court's decision saying it was reasonable for the trial court to conclude based on the facts that it was 50-50 and they did enough of the trial court's findings. So the first.
The wife gets the shares, is that what that says?
So yeah, if it's 50-50, then what is it? Like you have to invoke what state is this? Louisiana, Community State. Sweetie Harvey State, where the wife would probably have to be shared with already the wife, no one dies, probably. I'm not sure how this is.
The way I was thinking is 50 is Kirk's, but remaining is theirs.
So even Kirk gets some of that too.
Because he was one of the original promoters.
Okay, so check out the announcements. I'll let you know what is due in exchange for tomorrow, Wednesday's class. There's no class Wednesday. You don't have anything due on Wednesday, but if you do before you come back on Monday, we're going to finish 42 on Monday.
Hopefully that comes out okay.